This film begins years after the world was struck by the rapture, giving rise to human-eating creatures called burned ones that haunt the woods. Meanwhile, some survivors formed a devil-worshipping cult that forbids speaking as a form of repentance by removing their vocal cords. On the other hand, two of them, Azrael and Keenan, managed to escape from the cult and live independently in the woods. One day, Azrael hears a suspicious sound among the trees. This makes her panic, and she quickly extinguishes the fire Keenan has lit. At that moment, Keenan calms her attentively. As a token of gratitude, Azrael gives him a handmade bracelet woven from branches and plants. Not long after, Azrael discovers someone who seems to be observing the area. Then they hear that sound again and realize it's a whistle, a sign that members of the devil-worshipping cult are close. Both of them run away. Keenan suggests they split up, running in different directions. Unfortunately, Azrael is quickly spotted by the cult member who is chasing her, but soon after, Azrael returns to the original place. Tragically, one of the cult members captures her and strikes her in the stomach until she loses consciousness. Azrael is then dragged into the woods, where she sees Keenan has also been caught. When they reach the road, Keenan tries to escape but is threatened with a machete by a cult member. They are then thrown into separate car trunks and taken away. During the drive, Azrael feels frightened because each car heads off in a different direction. Azrael tries to open the trunk, but she fails. The car finally stops at a location deep in the woods, where many cult members have gathered with Josephine, their leader. Azrael is tied to a chair, and Josephine injures her leg until it bleeds, planning to make her a cult member as a sacrifice. The wind begins to blow fiercely, shaking the bottles hung in the trees, producing a terrible sound. Josephine and her cult followers look exhausted, as if they are performing a silent chant. Moments later, a burned one appears from the darkness and moves toward Azrael, who is bound. Terrified, Azrael struggles to free herself, until she finally manages to break one armrest of the chair. A satanic worshipper tries to stop her, but in the ensuing fight, Azrael accidentally thrusts the broken wood into the worshipper's neck. As the man tries to flee, a burned one leaps onto him and devours him. Seeing the chaos, Azrael uses the moment to break free. With her hands still somewhat free, she manages to undo her bindings. After escaping, she immediately runs away. The cult members, still in the midst of their ritual, realize Azrael has fled. Meanwhile, the burned one carries off its victim's body as food and leaves the place. Azrael finally stops at the edge of a river to wash her wounds and gather some plants to treat them. While she is focused on dressing her injuries, a burned one approaches from behind. Luckily, Azrael hears a faint weeping sound. She spots the creature and manages to hide in an old structure. The burned one searches for her there but finds nothing. After making sure the situation is safe, Azrael continues on her way. She finds tire tracks on the road and decides to follow them. They lead her to a camp. Cautiously, Azrael slips through a gap in the fence that can be opened to enter. She moves quietly to avoid the guards. While hiding behind a car, Azrael sees the handmade bracelet she gave Keenan lying on the ground. She becomes more convinced that Keenan is in this place. She keeps watching until she finds a large sign indicating the cult's gathering spot. When she enters a tent, she sees their main leader, Miriam, who is pregnant, yet still leading the ritual. They listen to the wind, believing it to be a sign from nature. After the ritual ends, Miriam blows out a candle to mark the close of the ceremony. As everyone leaves, Josephine remains behind. Disappointed by the failed ritual in the woods, Miriam slaps Josephine. However, they are suddenly startled by a loud noise outside. Miriam takes a peek but doesn't see anything. Azrael, hiding underneath the building, manages to avoid being spotted. When Josephine goes out to check the source of the noise, Azrael tries to flee. However, Josephine catches her. She chokes Azrael, forcing her to fight back by kicking her in the face. In desperation, Azrael keeps running around the area, trying not to get caught. Josephine then rings a bell to warn everyone about an intruder. The clatter of bottles and pots echoes to spread the alert. Some cult members see Azrael and begin to chase her. Azrael tries to get past barbed wire, but her hands are cut on it. Unfortunately, her foot gets stuck, and a man attempts to grab her. Azriel manages to free herself. Another member tries to shoot her, but the bullet only hits a tree. Despite her pain, she continues to run until nightfall, her body too exhausted to go on, especially because of her open wounds, leaving a trail of blood on rocks and trees. It turns out the smell of blood attracts the burned ones. The creature comes closer and starts licking the blood off the rocks. When Azriel sees this, she immediately runs again. The situation worsens when other burned ones creatures appear and join the chase. Luckily, one of them stumbles and falls, giving Azriel the chance to reach the road. But suddenly a light shines in front of her, causing her to fall as something big approaches. A car stops right before it can hit her. The driver gets out and asks if Azriel is one of the survivors while helping her stand. Confused, Azriel gets into the car, frantically signaling for the man to drive away. The man returns to the driver's seat and drives through the night. On the way, he offers Azriel a cloth to treat her wounds, explaining that he lives at the end of the road. Azriel, not understanding the man's language, tries to show the cross-shaped scar on her neck to indicate she can't speak. But the man keeps talking, so he finally puts on some music to change the mood. They have only traveled a few more miles when the driver's head is struck by a bullet fired by a cult member standing in the road. The car swerves after several more missed shots. Azriel tries to reach the steering wheel, but the car crashes into a wall after hitting the armed man. Several minutes later, Azriel comes to with a bleeding head, feeling dizzy. She struggles out of the car, then collapses to her knees in pain. She soon realizes that the cult member who shot them is still alive. Azriel leaps toward him, trying to grab the gun. They wrestle until the weapon slips out of their hands and rolls into the woods. When they separate, the man tries to shoot Azriel again, but the gun is out of bullets. Instead, he slams the gun handle into Azriel's leg. Azriel notices the gun's magazine drop to the ground and manages to hit the man's head before kicking him away. Azriel crawls toward the gun, but the man attacks her from behind, attempting to choke her. In a desperate struggle, Azriel manages to fire the weapon, killing the man. Afterward, Azriel continues through the woods with the gun in hand. Near a tree, she sees a fire and approaches it cautiously. But as she gets close, she accidentally triggers a trap that tightens a rope around her leg, leaving her dangling from a branch. Another man appears. At that moment, a strong wind blows, distracting the man. Azriel tries to climb the rope to free herself, but her efforts worsen the wounds on her hands. Looking down, she notices that the man has suddenly disappeared. The man then reappears, shoved hard against a tree by a burned one that begins to devour him. Another burned one arrives to help its companion. Still hanging, Azriel struggles to loosen the rope from her leg, racked with pain. At last, she climbs up the rope far enough while the creatures gather over the man's body. Once finished, one of the burned ones hauls the victim's corpse away, while another leaps at Keenan, dragging him off. But one burned one starts climbing the tree toward Azriel. She tries to untie the rope around her ankle, but the creature lunges to bite her. Azriel wraps the creature's limbs with the rope and pushes it off the tree. She falls too, but survives. Azriel goes back to the camp with the gun, hiding behind a tree. She whistles, pretending to be part of the cult. Hearing that signal, Josephine orders her followers to check the woods, giving Azriel a chance to slip through the fence as she did before. Moving carefully inside, she finds Miriam looking weak, her belly still pregnant. When Azriel hesitates to shoot her, Miriam quickly strikes her over the head with a cooking pot. As she falls, she manages to scratch Miriam's stomach. After that, Josephine's group drags her into the woods. They smear blood on her face while listening to the howling wind. Then they throw her into a coffin and bury her quickly. Azriel starts to panic, pounding the coffin from inside, but no one hears her. After the burial, a lantern suddenly shines near her feet, revealing a tunnel connected to the coffin. Azriel immediately crawls into the tunnel, but the growling of a burned one makes her pause. She scrambles back toward the coffin, yet the creature approaches, sniffing her hand and seemingly recognizing Miriam's blood. After roaring in apparent acceptance, the burned one leaves. Azriel seizes the chance to escape once more. This time she successfully emerges from the tunnel. Moments later, Josephine hurries outside upon hearing the commotion. She is shocked to find an old woman's place on fire. A cult member sets off the alarm, and they all rush to extinguish the flames. But it's too late. The old woman has died, and the blaze keeps spreading. Azrael slips in unseen and attacks one of the cult members. Realizing what's happening, Josephine panics and tries to flee. Azrael manages to shoot her in the abdomen. Meanwhile, the other cult members become frantic and attempt to run away. The fire finally reaches a gas cylinder, causing a small explosion that worsens the situation. Amid the chaos, a man devastated by his partner's death starts shooting at Azrael. They fire at each other while taking cover, as the flames continue to consume the camp. The man grows more disoriented when he hears whistles coming from various directions, thinking Azrael is toying with him. Panicked, he fires at the first silhouette he sees, only to realize he has killed a fellow cult member. Horrified by what he has done, he stands still for a moment. Azrael uses this moment to grab a machete and slash the man's head. Azrael then enters a room, but Miriam suddenly attacks her from behind. Miriam chases her, throwing objects aside to find her. She tries to pin Azrael onto a table and slash her, but Azrael evades her. When Miriam tries again, Azrael dodges and shoves her against the wall, biting her neck. As Miriam reels in pain, her water suddenly breaks. At the same time, a shot rings out, hitting a hanging cross in the room. It turns out to be Josephine, still moving slowly from her wound. She keeps firing as she approaches Azrael, but stops when she sees Miriam in labor on the bed. Seeing this, Azrael quickly pushes her, causing her to fall and shatter a bench. Josephine grabs a piece of wood and tries to attack Azrael, but she counters in the same way. Then Josephine comes at her with a knife. Azrael manages to block it and slams her head against the bench, knocking her down. She takes the knife and plunges it into Josephine's neck. Josephine finally dies. Terrified, Miriam tries to end her own life using Azrael's machete. Moments later, a fierce wind blows through, snuffing out all the candles. A group of burned ones enters, finding Azrael cradling Miriam's newborn baby, which appears to resemble a goat-like infant, with features reminiscent of some infernal being. The burned ones roar, signaling they recognize the infant as their leader. Azrael smiles, realizing the child in her arms will become the burned one's ruler, and thus the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.